Yo, Bolt here, and this is more of a spur-of-the-moment kind of video, because I just watched an animated pilot, and I kinda want to give my thoughts on it. Funny enough, I actually just saw in my YouTube recommended feed, and like, the title and the fact that it was an animated pilot definitely grabbed me, especially given the fact that it only has around 70,000 views so far, which, given other animated pilots around it, is fairly small. So I figured I'd give it a bit more attention. This pilot goes by the name of The Art of Murder, and is animated by Chalk Chip Animation Studios. I guess to start out by talking about the premise, while the thing that comes to life when you're not looking trope has been done multiple times before in animation, I mean, this pilot quite literally makes a Toy Story joke. Heck, even creating parodies of multiple different medium characters that come together is also a trope that's been done before. High drawn together for probably the most popular cartoon example. However, I really like how these two tropes are put together, because in some ways it can be kind of relatable. I mean, how many of you relate to, like, making your first OC after drawing your favorite characters multiple times? It's actually a really fun premise with a lot of potential. And while I have my own criticisms that I'll definitely get into, I personally think this short was pretty fun. I think I want to get the obvious out of the way first. Holy shit, this is gorgeous! Like, I found out after watching it that this has apparently been in production for over 2 years, and I can tell there was so much love and attention put into every single frame of this. Every character looks appropriately stylized. The lighting here is gorgeous. The animation itself is fairly fluid. It comes together so well. I also want to give credit to the voice actors. Every single one helps to bring their character to life in ways that sometimes the writing does struggle to at times, with my favorites being Joey Richter, who helps bring Giorgio to life with how fucking dramatic he can be, Megan Lee, who does a really good job at selling Wynn's energy and helping give off that vibe from the cartoons I assume they're trying to parody, and Lizzie Freeman, who does a really good job in differentiating her voices for Pip and OC, and it also really sells the latter's optimism coming into this world. Also, if I had a nickel for every single indie pilot I watched where Lizzie Freeman voices one of the protagonists, I'd have 2 nickels, which isn't a lot. But as we know, animation and voice acting can get a show only so far. So how are those? I think they're pretty fine. Nothing spectacular, but like, I really am charmed by this world. The story itself is fairly basic, in that it only really serves to introduce the characters. However, I think it does a fairly good job at doing so, for most part. By the end of the short, you'll definitely have an idea as to what most of these characters are like, and I guess to use that as a transition point, I find most of the characters to be somewhat charming, if a bit simple by design. I guess I'll go from least favorite to favorite. Pip is a fairly standard character. Of course she is. She's essentially the Andy of this universe. The person our characters are supposed to look up to and want to make happy. However, I think they do a decent job in making her fairly endearing, whether it be through directly showing her struggling with certain things in art, or just by learning what she's into through the other characters or the stuff in her house. Attention to detail like that can really help you to get to know a character, even if they don't get that much screen time. Now for the first of our main cast, we have Sosuke, who right now is a character I find charming, but do hope they do more with in the future. I mean, he's the shonen anime parody, Naruto specifically. And there are some gags I find really endearing, namely the fact that he can apparently understand English, but none of the others can really understand Japanese. And I do think he's a pretty charming character with his mannerisms, and especially his design. Seriously, that design goes so hard. I just hope that by the next episode, we can see more stuff with him than just anime jokes. I didn't particularly mind most of them. Hell, this is a far better anime parody than, like, most Western cartoons try to go for. But this is just a very easy character trope and parody to make unfunny, rather it be through lack of variance or potential xenophobia. So I am a bit cautiously optimistic. Next up is Lauren Lopez, which, first of all, automatic points for her name and the fact that I'm pretty sure she's Hispanic. And when it comes to her character, I think she's pretty fun. I like a few of the jokes that she makes in relation to being a 2D animated character and the fact that that type of medium is kind of dead, especially when she's able to bounce off of characters like Wynn. And I also find it a bit funny that she's essentially an aspiring venture capitalist. I do think they're sometimes a bit heavy-handed on the subverting princess tropes thing that has been done a million times, but it's not really that bad. I just mention it because most fucking jokes about princess characters have been about that very thing, including by Disney for the last, 10 years. Next we have OC, who as a character, I think is a perfectly fine blank slate to introduce the other characters with. I mean, it makes sense for them to be in that role. They're quite literally unfinished. However, I feel like you could have done more to, solidly introduce them as a character, but that's going to go into one of the bigger problems I have with the pilot overall, so I'll save that for later. Next is Win, who's a lot harder to find a direct inspiration for. Like, we know she's a parody of modern animated cartoons in the US, but like, it's hard to pinpoint a direct thing, which at first I was like kind of on, but also I've actually kind of grown on. I like that we have a parody character that has a clear source, but it's hard to pinpoint any specific thing or trope she's based on. Like, the most I can say is that her personality feels like a much more openly girly and kind of sarcastic equivalent of Mabel or Webby from the DuckTales reboot. And the way she's drawn actually more so reminds me of like Strawberry Shortcakes meets Hilda or the Owl House. Again, it's a great blending of different sources to create, honestly, a kind of original parody character. Also helps that I think she has some of the funnier jokes in the pilot. Specifically, and this is actually something she has in common with Mabel, I love how she bounces off other characters. Especially Sosuke and Lauren. Last, we have Giorgio. Fucking Giorgio. The biggest bundle of charisma in this entire pilot. I think of all the characters here, Giorgio has the most defined personality. Obviously, as a detective from a romantic visual novel, he has a passion for solving crime, he's kind of an egotist, and he fucking loves theatrics. Genuinely probably the most entertaining character in the entire pilot. But yeah, no, I think the characters overall are charming, even if they are kind of one note. And it makes that by the end of the episode, when the murder mystery starts to happen, you really are intrigued how these characters are going to react when pressed. So far I've been decently positive, but I do want to talk about my two major issues with it. First, I think some of the humor can be a bit overly referential. Obviously, with parodies, it's gonna come with the territory in some way, shape, or form. But I feel like there are way too many name drops specifically, especially like near the end of the episode. I think there's a thing as going too far. And I think the constant mentioning of can fire Ice Princess this, or Calm Cap that, or just very on-the-nose, obvious references like that, I just don't find too amusing. Honestly, the funniest references to me were the Toy Story one and the Boruto one. Mainly because the Toy Story one, well, it was kind of playing on the idea of the show to begin with, and I find the score that plays when it happens kind of amusing. And the Boruto one was playing on Sosuke as a character rather than just naming, like, I don't know, I can't even think of a parody name for Boruto. Next is an issue kind of more baked into the pilot's structure, that being the pacing, which I know is kind of a cliched criticism, especially for, like, indie animated pilots, but I do think it is rather jarring here. I feel like it takes a bit too long to get to, like, the actual core premise of the show. Like, I get the ending is supposed to be, like, the mystery of, like, oh, this happened and who done it. And you obviously need time to establish these characters, but I feel like there are moments where, like, it's mainly just jokes, a lot of them being some of the unfunny reference humor. And a lot of the music number is already spent, well, introducing these characters, when by this point, I think we have a pretty decent idea what they're like. And its pacing also makes the sudden jealousy that our characters have towards OC a bit forced. It's just established in the middle of the song number, and it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Especially when everyone has been nothing but kind to OC, at the very most being curious about their existence, and introducing them to the world. Like, maybe we could have had a bit more time between OC and the crew, so that we can see why they'd be jealous. Heck, maybe just, like, have OC remember various things about their lore, implying that Pip is growing a very vivid imagination, and having that worry them that she's going to grow past them. I think I'm just, like, throwing darts here, because, like, the pilot and foundation's already out, you can't really change what's already here, obviously. But I feel like the pacing is, like, the only big problem I have here. Because I see a lot of the passion that's put into this, a lot of the fun characters here. I love the idea of a murder mystery between in-universe pre-existing characters, especially with the add-on that's from a girl's imagination, with the murder subject being her OC. It's such a fun premise, and overall I would definitely recommend this pilot. I just think there are a few kinks that could be ironed out to make this a really great show. But hey, this is just like my heavily unscripted first impressions of the show. Who knows what I'll think about it after I watch it a few more times, or say when there are potentially more episodes released. I'm leaving a link to it in the description, because I do genuinely recommend it. This has been the Fireball, and thanks for listening to my ramble.